It had been a while since Lola stopped crying. She sat next to Trinity, who kept a watchful eye on the kids. She looked over at Lana, who sat restlessly, holding her wrench with one hand, smacking the head against them with the palm of the other. She looked at Lola and smiled and waved. Lola was still mad at Lana, but she waved it back anyways. Then another kid hurried over to the gym, ran up to the teen, who spoke for a few seconds, and then looked at Trini with a holder wrench to watch the kids as he heard a few other teens ran out of the gym. Lola could sense that something was wrong. She scooted closer to Trinity. Luna, Luann, and Lynn were happy to be back and wanted nothing more than to go look for their sisters. But Stan told them that Duke was wanting to hear from all of them, although they were pretty sure that he just didn't want to face Duke alone. Duke sat in the auditorium, still brooding over the recent attack. He studied his spear. He wasn't too happy for himself of how he handled the attack. He just hoped that no one judged him for hesitating when he was told that more adults got into the school. Instead, it had been Joey who sprang into action, took down several of the grown-ups. Since the beginning, Duke had been lying about his heroics. He had told everyone it was him. Joey and Stan had helped Duke take out the adults at the school, when in fact it had all been Joey and Stan. Sure, Duke did help, but he mostly just jabbed pathetically at the adults with his spear. Oh well, Duke said. He was a leader. Leaders didn't have to be good fighters. Just then someone rushed into the gym. It was Tyler. Duke looked up at Tyler, who looked worried. "What's up, Tyler?" Stan looked, and the rest are back. Duke looked pleased. "Great. Have them come here and tell me about their trip." "Yeah, about that." "What?" Duke tensed up. Had any of them died? If someone did die, he hoped it was one of the Loud sisters. He especially hoped it was Lynn. He couldn't stand her or "I'm better than him, you" attitude. "Don't freak out, Duke. They brought company." "Huh?" Tyler opened the door and walked in Stan, followed by the Loud sisters, then a goth girl, then a kid that Duke recognized as Zeke. Then around 20 kids followed, and then a boy wearing a Colts jersey, followed by 50 or other kids who were from Colts jerseys, while the younger kids wore plain clothes. Duke shot out of the seat before he could get anything ready. Randy spoke up. "Hoisters!" he shouted. Gene Hackman, Barbara Hershey, Dennis Hopper. "Be quiet, Randy!" Duke shouted. Then he turned his head back to Stan. "Dude, what the fuck is this?" Stan then looked at the group and then back at Duke. He told them about how they ended up at the church and how Jeremy died. He broke down before he could finish the story. "We had to leave him. We had to leave Jeremy." Duke tried his best to not look upset, but he couldn't. He was too focused on the new kids, especially since he barely knew Jeremy. He didn't arrive until a day or two after they secured the school. Duke then told Stan to calm down when he didn't, and then he turned to Cooper and asked him to finish the story. Cooper then told him about the sewers and finding Ethan's group. Since Cooper was the one telling the story, Duke turned to Zeke and Ethan. Since Duke was already knew a bit about Zeke, he decided to start off with Ethan. "Ethan, was it? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?" Ethan told him about who they were and where they came from and why they were here. He also included that something didn't want to tell Stan or anyone else on their way to preschool. And then they all of a sudden saw that his group were being pursued by a large group around 500 adults that seemed to be led by a deceased woman who wore a pink dress. A woman they called Princess. "What?" Duke was shocked. "When was the last time you saw this group? How close are they?" And when he called Ethan an idiot, that would be on their way right now. "Don't worry," Ethan reassured Duke. "We're pretty sure we lost them. That's not good enough. We could be sitting ducks at the school. We'd be so fucked if those adults are surrounding us like zombies in the Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead." "Dawn of the Dead!" Randy shouted. "Did Fringe Rames, Jake Weber, Ty Burrow, Michael Kelly." "Be quiet, Randy," said Duke. Ethan then looked confused. Then Norman spoke up and spoke. "You don't really know those grown-up zombies, do you?" "No, that was just an example." "That's good, because they aren't zombies. Zombies aren't living corpses who brought back to life by either magic or some kind of experiment. And as far as I know, when those adults bite, they don't turn into zombies or whatever. Someone dies, they don't come back as a zombie. Therefore, they're not zombies. Then what do you call them? Normally we call them adults or grown-ups. but I guess we should come up with something else, as long as we don't call them zombies. Zombies are pure horror fantasy. They don't exist. Zombies do exist, said Duke. What then? No, they don't. Yes, they do. Have you heard of Rob Zombie? He's just a cartoon character, said Norman. Some of the kids laughed in statement, Duke included. What's so funny? Norman said, looking around. Before anyone could say anything, Randy spoke up again. A House of 1,000 Corpses. Sid Haig, Aaron Daniels, Rainn Wilson, Walton Goggins. Be quiet, Randy, Duke said again. Why does the hell he keep doing that? Ethan asked, looking at Randy. No idea, Duke answered. Well, we really do need to come up with a name for those things. Infected? Someone said. No way. Biters? Another voice called out. Maybe. Strangers? Monsters? Sickos? Duke shot down all the suggestions. I have an idea, a kid said. Everyone looked to see a boy who was standing at the auditorium. It was Chandler. How about we call them Greens? Why Greens? Duke said. Because the adults have sickly green skin and we hate them. And you know what else is green and we hate? Chandler looked at the dramatic pause. Vegetables. Some of the kids laughed. The others shook their heads. It's perfect, said Duke. Some of the kids objected to Duke's idea of calling the adults Greens. That's stupid, said Ethan. Yeah, some of us like vegetables, Lynn also said. I don't care what you think, Dukes told him. I'm the leader, and if I say the adults are called Greens, then they're called Greens. Lynn rolled her eyes. Every suggestion she heard before Greens was way better term. Excuse me, someone said. All their eyes turned to the voice. It was Zeke. I only came down here with my flock because I heard there was a girl here. A smart girl who is trying to find a cure. Who told you that? Duke asked. Does it really matter? I just want to meet the girl who's going to end all this. In a minute, Duke told him. First I need you to tell me about yourself. I know your name is Zeke and you're extremely religious and into fitness, but I also like to know if you've survived so far. The grace of God, Zeke answered. Can you elaborate? It's simple. I'm the chosen one. I do what God tells me to do right now, and now God wants me to go see the girl who is going to stop all this. There was all murmuring throughout the auditorium. As Zeke finished talking, Lincoln, Clyde, and Lucy and the other kids were standing at the back of the auditorium against the walls. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. What are you talking about? I'll tell you what he's talking about. A girl stepped up holding a younger boy's hand. And who are you? Duke asked the girl. My name is Mary Harper. Zeke is telling the truth, and he says he's the chosen one. And how can you be so sure? Because, Mary began. She had told them what she told Stan earlier, about how some of the adults would attack Zeke, but about how he kept them safe from hearing the voice of God tell him that Stan's group was going to show up. She left out the most important part why they were there, though. Something Zeke had told him earlier. Something that he only trusted with his flock. Duke slowly nodded his head and turned to the rest of Zeke's group. Do the rest of you believe this as well? A lot of the older kids nodded enthusiastically. Okay, Duke simply said. Zeke, I'm going to have to ask you to leave and take your flock with you. What? Zeke's heart dropped. You heard me. You and your group are obviously crazy, hearing voices and shit. We're not crazy. It's the truth, Zeke protested. I'm pretty sure you believe that, which is why I can't have you staying here. You and your group are too much of a risk. Please, Zeke begged. I just need to see this girl and then we'll leave. I can't let you do that. Zeke eased up and clutched his hammer tight. So be it. He turned to the teens that were standing next to him. There were 12 teens that he knew from the church and gym, and they were all strong as he was. They returned his gaze, and they instantly knew what they had to do. Duke felt bad that he was about to send these kids out on their own, but if Zeke was really close to God, as said he was, he should be fine. Joey, will you and the other guards please escort the kids out of... Then there were screams as Zeke raised his hammer, hit the closest teen next to him, square in the side of his head. One of the members of the church brandished knives, slashed at the teens who stood close to him as well. Duke swore. Stan hurried away from the slaughter, while the Loud Sisters all held each other and stepped back. Joey rushed towards Zeke, but was cut off quickly by one of Zeke's friends. Zeke constantly swung his hammer, hitting any other kid that stood his way from the break of the auditorium doors. As he got nearer, some of the kids were standing near the door watched at the arrival of the kids group out of curiosity, quickly stepped out of the way. He was finally back in the halls of Royal Woods Elementary School. Looking in every room, he passed by each door. Lincoln held on to Lucy as he held a few of her kids, began to scramble the corner of the auditorium away from the scuffle. "What the heck is going on?" Clyde shrieked. Lincoln just didn't have an answer. He suddenly spotted sisters scurrying away from the scene as well. He screamed their names and they all looked at him, made their way towards each other. "What's going on?" Lincoln asked as they reached the other. "I have no idea," said Luna. "Did you hear what Zeke said, though?" Lincoln asked. "Yeah," Lynn answered. "He said God told him to go see Lisa?" "Yeah," Luann nodded. "But what could it? They all began to swear and make their way towards the hallway after Zeke. Clyde then tried to follow, but was quickly cut off by a bunch of kids as they ran past him. By the time he made it to the hallway, he had no idea where Lincoln and his siblings were. Joey and a few other guards and Ethan and some kids from this group were all making a stand against Zeke's group. Some of the church kids were slashing furiously with knives, while some of the younger kids cried as they watched the scene unfold. Joey and his group quickly gained the upper hand and outnumbered the group. The church began to flee, as some of them were killed by elementary school group in the cults. Zeke continued down the hall, where he could hear a voice calling out to him. He was getting closer. He stopped when he reached the gym and looked in. There were only kids in there. Some of the older kids were watching them. Some of the kids noticed him but hurried away before they could get a closer look. "Closer," the voice continued. Zeke's heart was racing. He could see that he was almost there, attainment that was at hand. He didn't doubt himself. He knew he would succeed. He was the chosen one. Why else would the blast have occurred on his birthday of all days, especially his 16th birthday? He knew that the disease would only affect people 16 and older, but not him. He had been the non-infected 16-year-old in the world. The disease had spared him, so he could do that one necessarily for stopping the development for a cure. The only way that would be to kill Lisa Loud. She was no savior. She was a heretic. Lisa continued studying the adults. He was acting strange over the last few minutes. He almost looked excited. "I have to go to the bathroom," Brian told Lisa. Lisa made no gesture to indicate that she heard him. He didn't even bother repeating himself and went out of the room. After he shut the door and started down the hallway, that's when he heard someone running towards him. "Who in the world?" Brian suddenly heard shouts coming from the hallway past the approaching figure. Some of Lisa's older siblings appeared, shouting at him to stop that kid. Brian didn't even know what to do. As the kid got closer, he realized that he was bigger and stronger than him. All Brian could do was stand in place, stretch his arms out. The kid bowled right over Brian, knocking him out. Zeke noticed that his kid was wearing a white lab coat. That meant he had come from the lab. "Here!" the voice screamed out to him. Zeke smiled once as he looked into the room, saw Lisa was alone. He knew that God wanted him to accomplish his goal. Lisa heard the door open and assumed it was Brian returning because he had forgotten something. Then she heard the sound of the table being dragged across the floor, just as it sounded like when Brian was done earlier. She looked behind her and saw it was a kid she didn't recognize shoving the table against the floor to prevent anyone from entering. He then looked at the adult, who was chained to the table, and then looked at her. Lisa quickly became terrified. The person who stood before her had bloodstains on his clothes, wielded a hammer that was dripping with blood, and a wicked smile was his creepy face. Lisa was too afraid to say anything. And the way the teen spoke, "We would have traveled light years, searching for a planet with suitable hosts, one we could call home." He then took a step towards Lisa, prompting her to take a step away. Zeke continued, "We only live to consume and devour flesh of our planets of young ones, and we will stop at nothing to accomplish our goals." Lisa took another step away as the teen stepped closer. There was suddenly banging on the door and screams. Lisa recognized the screams. It was her siblings. They were pounding on the door, shouting threats and obscenities to Zeke, but he ignored them. "We are the future, not you or anyone else. The world belongs to us. We will hunt, kill, feed on every kid until the end of time. Nothing can stop us, not even you." Lisa began to search for something under her desk, something she didn't trust anyone, but she knew it was there. Her siblings continued to beat on the door on the wood as it began to crack. Zeke raised his hammer. "You will die. along with hope and finding a cure. We will live, strive, and prosper in our new world. We are the inheritors. We are the end. We are unstoppable. Lisa quickly grabbed and held up what she was looking for. It was a ray gun. She aimed it at Zeke and fired. He didn't even flinch at the beam of the energy shot right through him. Instead, he began to speed up to his advantage towards Lisa. But she fired again, and Zeke kept on moving. His blood began to dribble down to his clothes. The young scientist was really beginning to panic, as tears formed in her eyes. Images of her family and friends whooshed out of her head. She didn't want to die. She was only 4. She still had a long life ahead of her. Her life was filled with scientific discoveries, vast explorations, and joint intergalactic council. There was no way she'd be killed by this certain. Just that, the thought popped in her mind, aim for the head, as if it were siblings right beside her telling her that. She also remembered hearing Lincoln playing his first-person shooter games with zombies in them, and he always told the person if he was playing to aim for the head. Lisa wanted to smack herself for not thinking of it sooner, because Zeke was right in front of her now. She aimed the weapon at the head as he lifted his hammer. She closed her eyes, and her siblings finally barged in and pulled the trigger. The sun shone brightly into the world as the crowd waited for the ceremony to begin. Lisa sat in front of the center on the stage with a big smile. She could barely contain her excitement. Her dream had finally come true. Saving the world from the virus that took control of everyone 16 and older, was able to find a cure and bring back everyone who had gone mad due to the disease. She looked at the crowd of millions, and sitting on the row where only a few yards away was her family. She was delighted to find a cure for Lori, Lenny, her mom and dad. They all had a big smile on their faces. A man dressed in the suit approached the podium and stage and began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered here today to celebrate the incredible accomplishment of Lisa Marie Loud, who, despite all the hardships, attacks, and assassination attempts on her life, managed to find a cure for the horrible disease affected of us all and save humanity. The large crowd roared with applause. Lisa could feel the smile in her face growing bigger, and because of this accomplishment, she has now been chosen to represent Earth Interplanetary Council. The roars of the crowd continue as the man applaud her as well as the other leaders of the world. Lisa Marie Loud, your journey on Earth ends here, and your journey into the great beyond begins. Lisa got up and looked behind her, a rocket ship ready to launch. In front of it stood inhabitants from other planets, all of them Interplanetary Council as well. As Lisa approached the ship, she took one last look at the crowd and her family. The gigantic smiles on her faces waned one bit. "I'm so proud of her," said Rita. "I know," said Lynn Sr. "Our little genius is a hero and a savior to all mankind." He wiped his tears from his eyes. "I literally couldn't be happier for her," said Lori. "Who knew so smart and much can fit inside her head?" said Lenny. "We love you, sis. You're an all-star," Luna shouted. "I hope you have a blast." Ha ha ha. Luann laughed. "You're gonna kick butt," Lynn cheered. "Take care, Lisa," Lincoln shouted. "I hope the joy vast of the space," Lucy said. "I hope you get to see really cool, gross-looking human alien mutants," said Lana. "You're a space queen," Lola shouted. "Bye-bye, Sasa," said Lily. Lisa put on her special spacesuit and helmet and aborted the ship. The countdown began. A female alien standing next to her looked at her. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "I guess," Lisa answered, turning to the alien. She looked Nordic. She had white skin, long blonde hair with blue eyes. Lisa felt safe in her presence, as if the lady was protecting her. She gave off such an angelic vibe. "Don't worry," she said. "You're safe with us. No one will be able to hurt you again." Lisa nodded. "I just wonder if leaving's the right thing to do. I feel like there should have been more that I could have done for the world." The woman made a soft hushing sound and spoke again. "You've done all you could. There's nothing more for you here. Now sit back, relax. You have earned it." Lisa felt the calmness wash over her. The rocket ship blasted off, and Lisa could hear the word chanting her name over the thundering of rocket engines. "Lisa, Lisa, Lisa, Lisa." The launch site began to shrink away. Somehow Lisa could see anything as the rocket continued to ascend. She saw the town of Royal Woods, and then she just saw her school, and suddenly she saw her house. The place she loved most, The place was the most happiest. It wasn't school or the library, or the universities or museums. It was science labs where she was the happiest. It was her house, the Loud House, her one and only home. Now she was off to a new home, a new place, new adventure, space, the final frontier. Soon as she began to drift away, it was only till a dot in the middle of the blank, dark, starless atmosphere. Lisa closed her eyes as the rocket continued to the great beyond. Goodbye, Loud House. Goodbye, family. Goodbye, world. Lisa! 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 All of her siblings cried her name as if she'd come back to them, if they said it enough times. Luna held Lisa's body, to which it had Zeke's hammer embedded into its skull. Luann was on her knees as she drew back as she waited. Lynn was crying, swearing and punching the ground as she lay on all fours. Lincoln was sitting, holding Lucy as they both wept together. Meanwhile, at the auditorium, Zeke's group had been taken down. Some of them were dead and others were injured and no will to fight. Joey counted the bodies. He knew Zeke had escaped, but there was one missing. "There's one behind stage!" Ethan cried. He and Joey ran after him, slashing the tires of the bus. "I didn't know you guys had a bus," said Ethan. The teen just looked at them. "A bus that can't go anywhere." Joey swore and rushed to the teen. The boy held out his knife in a defensive stance, but Joey just ended up cutting his arm off with one good swing of his axe. The boy screamed and fell to his knees and looked up and shouted, "Are you watching, God? I'm doing this for you!" "No one was watching, not all of us," Joey said, coldly. He brought his axe down onto the boy's head. He and Ethan then dragged the body back to the auditorium, where the kids were still crying as the other teens were looking around nervously, still shocked at what just happened. Joey spotted Duke standing in the middle of the carnage, staring off in the distance, and ran up to him. "Come on, Duke, we gotta go after Zeke. I didn't want anything of this to happen." A tear ran down Duke's face. Joey slapped Duke, which brought him back to his senses. "Come on, dude. No one wanted any of this, but it's happened. Now be a leader." All right, Duke told some of the older kids to take the younger kids to the gym and told Ethan to go get some of his friends to keep an eye on the church's group. Ethan nodded and turned to look at the girl with the short, wavy blonde hair. "Lexi, you and Norman stay here and keep an eye on them." He then pointed at the injured church kids on the ground and scared little church kids in the corner. "We're going to go look for Zeke." "Yes, sir," she said, held up the axe as if ready to attack. As Joey and the rest made their way to the auditorium, they passed many of their kids who were lying on the ground with head wounds. Some of them weren't moving and sat and sobbed. "Looks like Sanjay is going to have a lot of work to do," Joey thought. Lana and Lola were still in the gym. Lana had gone up to Trini and told her that she'd seen a scary-looking person through the small window on one of the double doors. Trini put a hand on her shoulder and told her that the other kids will go and have a look. The kid then looked and saw the other kids run by. "I think something's going on," he said. Lana and Lola held closer together and saw some of the younger kids scooted closer to Trini. Then the other kids came to the gym. "What's going on?" a kid at the door asked one of them. "Stan and the others are back." Lana and Lola perked up when they heard this. "It's bad out there. People are dead." The twins looked at each other, then back at the kids that were pouring into the gym. "Are our sisters okay?" Lana and Lola got up and looked towards the kid before Trini can stop them. The kids looked at the twins, instantly knew who they were talking about. "Yeah, they're fine." Lana and Lola eased up. They were about to ask him where they were when they heard shouting coming from the hall. They recognized the shouts, but it was their siblings. Lana and Lola threw the caution of the wind and ran past to the kids in the halls, ignoring the shouts from the younger kids. They ran down past the hall as fast as their little legs can carry them. Their siblings' screams grew louder and louder as they were getting to where they're coming from. Their hearts were racing as they passed Brian, who was lying down on the ground rubbing his head. They reached to the room where the screams resided in the science lab. Lana and Lola looked in, and they saw their older sisters were crying, and a body of an older kid lying on the ground with a huge hole in his head as if he had been blasted by something. His were wide open. He had a smile on his face. They tried their best to ignore the body and approach their siblings without them noticing. Lola made a whimpering sound, and her siblings finally noticed them. They all looked at the other, and the twins noticed that Lisa was absent. "What's going on?" asked Lola. "Where's Lisa?" asked Lana. They both noticed that Luna was holding something in their arms. "What are you holding?" Lola asked. Luna tried to hide what she was holding, and as Lynn tried to escort the twins away. "No, where's Lisa?" Lana started to shout. "Where's our little sister?" Lola was screaming. Lynn was struggling to contain the words. Lincoln tried to get up and help Lynn, but Lucy held him to prevent them from leaving her. The twins were both screaming, and managed to break away from Lynn. "No!" everyone shouted. As the twins made their way towards Luna, she made the last-ditch effort to hide what she was holding from the twins, as if keeping them from saying what she held on to protect them from all the pain and misery that they were experiencing that moment. But the twins were too fast. Once they saw Lisa, the hammer was driven into their head. They lost it. Lana started to scream and sob, while Lola began to shake. Her vision became fuzzy, and suddenly she felt dizzy. She was surrounded by darkness. Lynn caught her as she fell and held on to her and cried, while the others joined in and they all held each other. Why did Lisa have to die? She didn't deserve to die. No one did. Soon the other kids appeared in the doorway. Some of them stepped back and began to cry while they saw the other dead bodies, while the others stood still and put their hands to their mouths. Duke, Joey, and Ethan finally made it to the science lab. "What happened?" Duke asked one of the kids. "The smart one. She's dead." Duke stood still as a stone as the sound of cries from the loud siblings began to fade into nothingness, only to be replaced with a high-pitched ringing noise. He could see the shapes of people still moving in front of him. He couldn't make out Ethan saying something to Joey. His arms shrugged the position, as if trying to ask him something. He could see Joey talking back to him, and Ethan put a hand to his head, as if Joey was shocked him completely. Even though he didn't hear that they were saying, he knew exactly what Joey had just said. Lisa Loud was a genius, the only person in the world who could have put a stop to this disease. And now she was dead. Their little beacon of hope was extinguished. This was the end. They were fucked. Duke wanted to kill himself at that moment. He wanted to take a spear and drive it into his chest. Why did they have to make Stan and the others go to the middle of the school? He should have just told Jay and the rest to screw off. If he hadn't sent them on his own, they would have never found Zeke, and Lisa would still be alive. This was all his fault. He hoped that one of the Loud sisters would die, so that Lisa would work harder on finding the cure. But at the end, it was Lisa who paid the price for the selfish act, the only one that they couldn't afford to lose. Duke wanted to be a hero, but now he was a villain. The human population was going to extinct, all because it had to be one on top. Chris and the others had dug the kids they had captured. Some of the kids had escaped, but Chris didn't fret over them. It's time they get theirs. Instead, Chris looked ahead to see where they'd go next. He then pulled a map that had studied the next few thrones that they ended up at: Hazeltucky, Hunting Oak, Ten Oaks, and Royal Woods. Chris couldn't wait to gather up more adults, as the looks on the kids' faces when they showed up. He figured if kids held up in the school, then there had to be groups of kids in these town schools as well. He laughed, shoved the map back into his pocket, and continued to dig into the flesh of practically a live kid that was lying in front of him.